What's up, gardening friends? How's everybody doing? Jeff here, Tropical Plant Party. Hope you're doing well. I am great. And today I want to talk about, I say this in all of my videos, one of my favorite plants. This truly is one of my absolute favorites though, and it is the Croton. Simply referring to it as a Croton is really very broad. There are tons and tons of different varieties, leaf forms, sizes, and care requirements when it comes to these plants. I'm going to talk about 3 different varieties, the Petra, Zanzibar, and the mother and daughters. Really just because those are the 3 that I have to show you. Right, let's talk about the stats. Your overall average care requirements are really just kind of the average facts about the Croton in general, specifically mostly the Petra. These are a tropical evergreen shrub. They're really kind of scattered throughout the South Pacific, Malaysia, Australia, and whatnot, the Philippines as far as like a native range go. They're in the Euphorbicae family, so that being said, you know from the name that there's going to be toxicity in this plant, so when you have it inside or around children, you need to be careful with it, but everything I have read says that they supposedly just taste terrible, so any one or thing eating enough of it to hurt them isn't very common. And because there are so many different varieties, the size on them really does vary. They can go anywhere from 2 to 15 feet tall. It just depends on what you're growing. Now, the Petra, you could expect probably 10 to 15 feet tall grown outdoors. Inside, I would say maybe 5 to 8 feet. You're only going to get maybe a foot of growth out of these a year, and that's kind of on the maximum end of things. Over here, you can kind of see some of the new growth on some of my Petra Crotons, or Croton Petra. The nice thing about the Petra variety is they're pretty easy to find, and that obviously depends on where you live. Where I am, I usually pick 3 of these up every single year from anywhere from $7 to $10 a pop, and I just drop them in the ground here around this palm tree. The price is somewhat comparable to that of a nice sized coleus, but I think they have a much more bold impact. Crotons do like slightly acidic soil, so give them a nice acidic fertilizer when you fertilize them, like the Espoma Hollytone. That works really well. They also don't like to dry out for too terribly long, but if it's cold outside, less water is better. One of the factors that really influences the color on these guys is the amount of sun you give them. Really, minimum part sun is best. I think a good 5 hours is sort of your minimal end. But you can always go lower and give frequent fertilizing with less water and hope for the best. But you're not going to get the best color out of them, and they're going to be kind of lanky and wonky looking. They'll get taller and thinner, and they tend to lose a lot of the leaves from the lower section of the plant, which actually sometimes looks kind of cool, but you just don't always have the nice color. The consensus seems to be that the more sun you give them, the more color you get. I have also read that shifting sun also influences the amount of color you get on the leaves as well. Shifting sun meaning instead of just planting them in full sun where sunrise to sunset, they're just getting tons and tons of sun. You put them someplace where the sun moves onto them, stays on them for several hours, and then gradually moves off of them. The only reason I can see that this would maybe affect the coloring is that certain parts of the plant are going to receive more sun than others, so there's more variation in color. So perhaps that's where that comes from. Oh, and on the note of the full sun, I forgot to mention that there are lots of varieties, and there are some varieties that actually do better with a little bit more shade. I think the Gold Dust variety, which looks a lot like the Acuba japonica, might be one of those varieties that doesn't need quite as much sun. Let's talk hardiness. These are fully hardy zones. Really everything online says zone 11 and up. I see these in zone 9B fairly often. Sometimes they'll defoliate when it's cold outside. Really, if they have frost, you can expect them to defoliate. But as long as you have a warm bounce back, then they should be just fine, as long as they're not soaking wet and don't remain below probably 45-50 degrees for too terribly long. If these do defoliate for you and you're concerned about them, wait to prune them until you do a scratch test. Go ahead and do a scratch test, which just take your finger, your nail, a penny, something. Give what's left of the stem a scratch. If there's still some green inside, then you still have a living stem, and that will likely resprout when the heat returns. If not, go ahead and just cut it back. It's likely that it'll regrow from the roots. And don't forget, I'm referring to like zone 9 and 10. So if you don't live someplace where you can grow these all year, you can bring them inside. If you live someplace where you're going to have to move these inside, I have some tips for you. One of those would be, go ahead and move them to a shadier location a few weeks before your frost. That way they're starting to acclimate to lower light levels, and it'll be less of a shock when you bring them inside. Now, I say that because oftentimes when you bring a Croton in from being outside on a patio where it's getting a lot of sun, air circulation, and humidity, you move it inside and they tend to drop their leaves fairly often. So acclimating them to lower light first does help. And also, you know, it doesn't hurt to hit them with an insecticide if you don't want to bring bugs in the house. These guys are magnets for spider mites, so keep that in mind. And then I'd say perhaps maybe the week before you move them in, it would be a good idea to go ahead and hit them with an anti-transpirant, such as no wilt. That will help hold the moisture in and maybe prevent a little bit less shock from moving it inside. Once you have them inside, this is where things can get kind of tricky for some people because they really do like warm, humid conditions. So a good option would be a bright bathroom that's typically humid in there. They'll usually do okay. A kitchen maybe, where if you do a lot of cooking and there's lots of water around. Also, keeping them around a lot of other plants will help because other plants release moisture, and that helps increase the humidity overall around them. Now, if those things aren't options for you, then just go the old classic method where you use a pebble tray. Put a tray under them, a nice deep one with some rocks in it, and add water. Just so long as the water isn't touching the bottom of the pot, should help fairly well for keeping the humidity up. The benefits of keeping these inside is that a lot of websites do claim these to be one of the air purifying plants. Don't know how much science there is behind it, but hey, it's a fun fact. Okay, so now that we've kind of broadly scathed over a lot of the different facts and care requirements for these guys, let's talk about a few of the varieties. This, like I said, is the Petra, the most common variety. At least where I am, this is the most common variety. And they get 10 to 15 feet tall outdoors, maybe 8 feet inside, which I think I already said. Here is one of my other varieties. You can see it looks very different, but it has a lot of the color just like the Petra does. And this is called the Mother and Daughters. It's called that because they have these long spindles that come off of the leaves that have other leaves on them. I think it gets that name because it's similar to that of like a mother holding its daughter's hands, perhaps. You can see these fun little spoon-like leaves that hang off from the plant. I don't know if those propagate easily. Maybe they pop off and you can air root them. I'm not really sure about that. This variety, however, will stay smaller than the common ones we were just talking about. I think maybe 5 to 7 feet tall might be the max end for this one. Hair, though, is pretty much going to be the same. And then this lovely little gem is the last of the varieties that I have in my yard, and it is called the Zanzibar. It didn't have a tag on it when I bought it, so I just had to Google it and sort of figure out that I think this is the Zanzibar. They have long, thin, strap-like leaves and that awesome coloration of all the other ones. This guy right here I think is supposed to say under 30 inches, maybe might get 3 feet tall. Again, they do not like wet feet, so when I bring it inside, I'll go ahead and probably water it bi-weekly. Just sort of have to see how it's doing with the indoor conditions. The Zanzibar, these strap-like leaves add so much texture and structure that this really would be awesome planted up amongst other plants as a thriller in the middle. I have even seen these in hanging baskets when there's young cuttings and they kind of spill, and it looks pretty neat. But I just love the texture on this variety. The Zanzibar is really cool. Crotons are so versatile. There's really a lot you can do with them. They are great during the summer because they have these crazy wild tropical colors, and in the fall they look really good in arrangements with mums and kales and cabbages and tall grasses and whatnot. They overall are just versatile as far as all the different things you can do with them. Now, I even have some that I got as very small plants that I sort of stuffed in here, and they're getting a little bit choked out, so I need to pull them up. But they really do add a lot of color when they're mixed in with other things. They help draw your eye. You can go ahead and put these in a background. You can even form them into a hedge, though that's going to be a very, very, very slow growing hedge. They respond fine to pruning. However, shearing, not so much, because those broad leaves, you're just going to end up getting brown edges on them and the rest of the leaves will fall off. It's not going to work out that well. Also, I forgot to mention this variety right here, the one I started the video off with, might be the Croton Petra, or the Petra variety that's called Florida Beauty. I'm not entirely positive, but the other ones I showed underneath the palm, those are just your regular standard Crotons. Okay, and that's going to do it for today's video. Just some fun little facts and some quick care tips on the Crotons. Hope everybody's doing well. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, comment, all that fun stuff. I love talking to y'all. And as always, keep on growing, everybody. Bye-bye.